legs ran frantic like birds from a nest, and I ran until drained, leaving no choice but rest. So I fell asleep softly at the edge of a cave, but I should have gone deeper, but I'm not so brave. And like that I was torn out and thrown in the sky, and I said all my prayers because surely I'd die as I crashed down and smashed into earth, into dirt. How my skin did explode, leaving only my shirt.
Why aren't we doing J.D. Vance's book?
Too easy. Already been done better by If Books Could Kill.
It's the
Oh my God, it's this shit.
IKEA couch catalog.
Have you guys seen this shit?
You know, yeah, when you press a thumbs up, it goes.
No, I didn't press anything.
Oh, I know, but you made the symbol.
And then this.
Anyone who's watching live is seeing fireworks behind Kaija's head. I'm going to read you guys a poem to start this off. So I think I alluded this last week. I don't think I read the poem, though, did I? I was playing around with AI because I've got a lot to say about AI this week. I was playing around with AI and asked it to write me a Rupi Kaur poem in the style, or is that an ode to J.D. Vance? And it generated this: your cushions hold the weight of my dreams, the spills of my late night thoughts. And I can't think of anything better. I'm on board for the robot revolution. Welcome to the 2-month review, the weekly podcast brought to you by Open Letter and 3%, in which we take a giant book, break it down bit by bit, section by section, talk about it, analyze it, have fun, make bad jokes. I'm Chad Post from Open Letter Books, joined as always by Brian Wood, author of Joytime Killbox.
Yeah, and future author of a self-published book that will sell millions. Just
hell yeah. All it takes is confidence. And a bright color. And also joined as always like Kaija Straumanis, editor and translator, and I don't know what else.
Did you almost mispronounce my last name?
No. I was looking to see if you had. I paused because I looked to see if you had a funny tagline this week, and you do not. So I was like tripped up because I was used to seeing not a painter or whatever else that you put in there. How are you doing today, Kaija?
I'm doing well. Just me rocking my historical grudges era.
Yeah, Soviet.
Yep.
Taking shots at the Putin army.
Yeah.
Good. So this season we're going through Lanark by Alistair Gray, and today we will finish it and finish the whole book, which, you know, we have like chapters 42, 43, and 44. And then there's also like a goodbye Tailpiece section, or it's just called Tailpiece. That's how Lanark grew, that I believe is a self what do you call that? Like a self-interview, a self-created interview. I don't think there's a real interviewer, but it's interview with Alistair Gray about the creation of Lanark. But also, I think he just wrote all the questions. So I don't think he's really prying into like the deeper seed of this. It's just a chance for him to be like, hey, here's these things, blah, 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 which is super fun. So I don't know, you guys got any banter anything you wanted to talk about before we get going on this?
I mean, I finished this book yesterday, which is fine, but I was busting my ass Tuesday night and yesterday morning thinking that we were going to go live in like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 5 minutes. It was Tuesday. It was Wednesday morning. So by the time I finished it yesterday morning and we got to last night, I was like, I don't know what to fucking do. I have new lease on life. I don't have to cram the last chapter in. I just truly asked Chad. I kind of wandered around listlessly for the rest of the evening. So the ADD procrastination at its it was just ashes on the fire, man. I had nothing to do.
Fair. I read this early in the week too, so it's not vague in my mind, but there's bits that I was like so hyped about. It's such a weird thing to read this and not, if I don't write down notes, then record a few days later, I'm always like, oh shit, what was that thing that made me really excited? And I look in my notes or the marks along the side of the page. I'm just like, what the fuck does that mean? Like, I'm not sure that means anything. Like, why am I putting exclamation marks next to that? I'll have to try and recall that memory from 3 days ago. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so we might have an announcement later in this episode that we will have for anyone who's paying attention. You might want to listen till the end to get some new news about the future of the 2-month review and things that might be shifting, changing, trying out, experimenting with. But we're not giving that away yet.
Are you pregnant?
That's called a teaser. That's called a teaser in the biz. Set you up, dude. I'm reading Dick Gibson Show by Stanley Elkin, which I think at some point it'll take a couple months, but I'm going to put together for the Mining the Delkey Archives Substack power ranking of Stanley Elkin books because I think that would be funny. Also, they won't have any real power ranking aspects to it. Obviously, it'll just be my nonsense. But the Dick Gibson show is all about a radio guy, right? Who's a radio voice, and it's the first 80 pages, and I believe the whole book, although my memory of reading it 26 years ago is a little bit sketchy, but I think the whole book is like this, where there's not really any explanation of Dick Gibson's life. That's also a pseudonym, a stage name, a microphone name. But 90% of the book, if not more, is just like him doing bits at the radio. And like podcasting is our audio mode for speech nowadays, or I guess TikTok videos too, or whatever. But man, AM radio and AM radio talk show hosts are such a soft spot in my soul. Like that he's just riffing, doing voices. He creates like all these characters, like he's changes his name at each station. The part that I just read is a station where like it's owned by like these four family brothers who are always running against each other in like electoral races. And they're the only ones who listen to the station because everyone's moved away from their like remote part of South Dakota. And so they're always like, you're just doing the station to please us. Quit with your nonsense. And so he's like, has to do like news items on like their lives and their family and like a radio hour in which it's like redocumenting their lives. It's so funny. And it's so perfect.
For me, it was less AM radio and more public television.
Yeah.
Remember the public television shows where you could go to like your local station, and like if you just show up and take the one class, they'll let you put anything you want on TV, basically. And it was only unhinged people.
That's on. I mean, I used to listen to
public access, right?
Yeah. I always put Charlie Rose in that category just because of the stage lighting.
I know a story about Charlie Rose that might be I don't think it's fallacious, but it might be what's the word for libel? Slander. Slanderous a bit, but we'll run that risk here for a moment. So I know someone who knows someone who Charlie Rose met at a bar and tried to take back to his apartment and took her back to the apartment. And while he was like in the bathroom or whatever, she was looking at his walls and he had a whole library of every single tape of a VCR tape of every single Charlie Rose recording that he had ever made. And I think he even like popped one out and popped it into the VCR as like a seduction trick, which solid, I suppose.
Hey, there was a boy in college who legitimately tried to take me back to his dorm to watch his baseball training video, and my roommate was like, oh, he's just trying to get you to his room, and his friend was like, no, he just wants to show you his training. Like, it's not.
That's so sad.
Like, sadly, it's not.
He's way more into stances than positions.
Whoa! He's pretty good at handling some balls, though, I suppose, and a bat. Yeah, I would hope.
So yeah, no hate on
fielding those guys. You fielded all those grounders.
People are proud of what they're proud of and their personal accomplishments.
In fact, which
it would have been, I don't know, would it have been worse or better if they had been sex tapes instead of interview tapes?
I guess I'm weird in that, and like I don't even want to go back to my place. Why would I want anybody else to see this sadness? I'd prefer to be alone if I have to, but I'd really just rather not.
Yeah, you can just show people your videotapes from the cloud. It's all stored in the cloud.
Yeah.
Oh my God. So true. I listened to the most recent If Books Could Kill about the anxious generation, and the book The Anxious Generation, and like the impact of social media on teens, and like this kind of panic about social media is ruining our teens, making them suicidal and all that kind of stuff. But one of the things that was interesting is in talking to teens, they're like the big problem with like social media is that you see on Instagram like where the parties are, which ones you're not invited to. People will like post pictures and not tag you, or they'll post an ugly picture of you and you can see it as passive aggressive and all this shit that like, as they're saying, I was like, man, when I grew up, like literally, like I never went to anything and never heard about any of those parties. But anytime I did, it'd be like, well, that's the embarrassment. I can't imagine today's world of like living in that embarrassment daily and seeing like the sort of stressors of like, here's where you didn't get to go.
Well, bring it back to Lanark. Like, I feel like the way that Lanark feels at the end, it'll happen in a social media environment. It happens like you're seeing here, like in a kind of like post-industrial, postmodern environment. I feel like people come to the same conclusions when forced to live in a fallible world. There's different avenues to get there. You can take the trail, you can take the highway, you can take the toll road, but you're going to end up in that same. You're going to end up in the exact same destination. There's just different roads to get there.
How would you articulate the destination?
Boy, that's tough. I don't know. Like, there's obviously acceptance at the end, but I love the fracture. I love this. I love the dichotomy that he and Sandy had at the end, and like wanting something to be meaningful, wanting something like, let me pass down something to you, let me share something with you. It's like, Dad, shut up.
Yeah.
Like all you get is like, go away. And it's the same way we kept talking about Thaw's father, where it's like, what a great dad. Like there's this, so that like, Dad, just let me do it the way I want to do it. If I want to wear sandals, I'm gonna wear sandals. Don't tell me how to hike.
Yep.
It's like, let me share something with you. Like, shut up.
I love that part.
Yeah, and like you can transpose like they're back to that same. It's that same pattern, that same cycle, and it's being relived. It's like, I think I'm good to go now.
Yeah. There is that. So,
have I ever told you the story of how, God damn it, just walk?
I found that's all kind of summarized in my one of my favorite lines of the week from 559, where he says, everything keeps getting renamed. I've stopped caring. Don't try to explain. Like, yeah.
That's when
See,
you just
it used to be Musically, then it became TikTok, and like, fuck off, man. I don't care.
If you just accept the old, then the old accepts you.
That's interesting you say that, because I think, and this might tie into, I don't know if Kai, if you came up with a sort of like grand idea or a theory or anything for this section or the book as a whole. I have one that like character is AI. And I know, Brian, you wanted to talk about like postmodernism in relationship to the book, and I have a response to that. So why don't you discuss first, like your idea of like the book as sort of a refutation of postmodern hell?
Well, I'm not like fully in support of it. I just thought it was just like one of those late at night thoughts about it. But yeah, I don't know. Like when you think of postmodernism and fracturing things and it becoming chaotic and collective truths versus objective individual truths, like all that fun stuff that we have to learn and forget in college. But I just noticed, like with this one, like it's very Kafkaesque, obviously, and then he mentions it several times, like whether it's allegorical. It's like modern allegory, but it's done in a more postmodern lens. And I think the hellscape is shown brilliantly through the chaos of like a lack of meaning, a lack of foundation. Like how does he become the position that he's in? I don't know. You just like fail into it. Like, you seem pretty ordinary. You go. But I have no business being here. It doesn't matter. Nobody has any business being anywhere. Go ahead. It's very Wizard of Oz, right? Like he mentions that as well in that tail part. But I feel like Gray was kind of looking at that, coming off the tail end of that explosion in Europe on the like art and literary scene, and kind of playing with his Pilgrim's Progress in a way, using that as his vehicle. Like even so much where it ends with maps. Right? Was it Baudrillard talking about maps? And I forget that essay, but like the maps and the meaning, and like if you have a big enough map that you can print over the landscape and place it right on top of the landscape, what's real now? What's like, I don't know. There was just too many like pieces that connect in little ways where I don't know. I feel like it was commenting on it, and I feel like Gray's not too happy with it.
See, that's interesting. Kaija, do you have a response to that? To giggle?
I chuckled.
Chuckle.
Chuckled.
There's just a speech act of
chuckle. But it's a half-baked hypothesis. I don't have anything to really like firmly stand on. I don't have a flag to plant on it, but when looking what happens to the individual in that landscape, I feel like it's not something that he champions for, wants to get behind.
So I think that there's a few different, like the term postmodernism is sort of like magical realism, right?
Yeah, sure.
Like it doesn't really
Science fiction
signify, but like there is like, I think that there's elements of it that can be applied differently. So sociologically, like what postmodernism quote unquote means sociologically in terms of art or literature or film or music or whatever other media you want to use. But like with this, I think like less of like to me, the reading this and taking your comments as like a lens is less about like the actual art, like the literature of postmodernism, but the fragmentation of capitalism, the fragmentation under capitalism as a sort of like postmodern moment is that you are chopped up, made into food, you are digested by the system, which exists within this section, which we can get into, to be like a grand or like organism that is a city that functions by eating you, using you, exploiting you, and keeping itself alive. That's like very like Frederick Jameson's sort of look at the way that society and capitalism is constructed. And then the counter to that is Lanark's constant attempts to find love and be human. And that does act against the postmodern moment as like the people who embrace like, oh yeah, everything's fragmented. This is wonderful. It's sort of like the advent of the internet idea. And not to go back to the anxious generation, but like the internet idea of like, we can all speak, everyone's there, everything, we can find our own niche. We can like, everyone's got a voice. There's no gatekeepers. It's all blown apart. Everything's your own fragmented bit also leads to like what Lanark keeps saying throughout here is I'm lonely. Like I'm alone. And like that like the attempt to try and find love and be kind and not be alone is like really the through line in this, like over and over again, even when he's like trying to find his like girls to kiss him back when it's like in the more straightforward section, the fact that he has to find a companion in Rima to leave the institute, their divorce issue, like everything is like him trying to find love right down to like, it's probably marked as one of my lines of the week, but like when he dies, because this book goes up through his death. So he's dead at the end of this. There's like a
spoiler.
Spoiler. I mean, he says it. Yeah, Alistair says it in that interview we read on the first thing where he's like, yeah, the book's obvious. Like part 1 is like ages 4 through 17 or whatever. And then he's like, and the last one is till death. But when he dies, he's going to die. And the Chamberlain says respectfully, have you a complaint? I have to have more love before I die. I've not had enough. That's everyone's complaint. You're going to appeal against death sentence if you have something better to do. And he's like, if you're hinting I should go in for more adventures, no, thank you. I don't want that. And then back to like what you said earlier, Brian, but how will my son, how will the world manage when I'm not here? The Chamberlain shrugged and spread his hands. Well, go away, said the Lanark more kindly.
Like, all right, time to die.
Time to die.
We go into the end. Right. And he said he's feeling old and defeated. Right. He's done all this stuff and all he's left with is feeling old and defeated. And I really like this part where he's like, well, what do you want to do? And he's like, how about I just go home? Right. Home, said Monbodo, raising his eyebrows. I'm think it may be bad, but the badness is obvious, not gilded with lies like here.
Yeah.
Oh, and
like,
is it ever obvious?
I just want something awful, but that I know is awful and is embracing that awfulness. Like, give me like a foundation, give me a solid like ground I could stand on, not just this fake bureaucratic crap that chops things up, pretends it's good. Like, I want the Russian propaganda. I want the USSR propaganda, not the USA propaganda kind of thing. Like, which one's worse, right? It's that. Give me like the real awful, but it knows it's awful and not trying to hide it.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I'm going to show you, Brian, that we can see it. Everything.
No more adventures.
No more adventures.
Well, I will jump in and say that all of that, and even him being like, "Well, time to die, just go off." There's still things that smack of the Bardo, of like when the Chamberlain is like, "Oh no, all those other deaths were just rehearsals. Like this one's the real one."
Yeah.
And afterward, like it's done. Like totally nothing personal will be left of you. So there is that like cyclical, what I was talking about from the beginning, this like how many times has he been through this sort of thing? And this is more of like stages and not full lifespans. But it also kind of made me think of The Sims. where
that ties into my AI theory. Yeah.
yeah, this like on page 557, where he's like, I've had an interesting life. And Rima's like, you're selfish. And Alexander's like, quiet, I'm trying to contact Defense Command. And he just like kind of hobbles around. Like it makes me think of Sims, where they're like, you don't understand what the others are. You don't understand what they're saying. Their interactions are like, they're weird at like, you have like 4 or 5 choices and everything. And it's like SimCity when you just click the disaster button. Now it's like earthquake.
That's
They're like, what's happening? Shut up. I'm trying to play the piano. I'm cooking sandwiches.
I'd be very interested to see some sort of detailed analysis of Sims circa 2004 versus Sims circa 2024. I'll bet you like the sort of levels of interaction and whatnot are vastly different now. But there was one of my favorite blogs of all time was this one called Kevin Alice, in which a guy took a Sims world and created Kev, who was like a drunk, deadbeat, couldn't get a job, just, angry, violent, like tried to make him homeless by making his house invisible and only having like a bench where he could sleep at Kev. And then his daughter, Alice, and Alice like tries to do the right things, blah, blah. And he set up all their parameters and just let them play out their world. And like, it was so dark and so funny. Like Alice would just like pass out in people's driveways and they'd be like, oh, she smells too bad to let her in the house. And like every time she'd get like money that could and like make her situation better, she'd give it away like to charity.
Like, she's too kind-hearted or something, right?
Like all those settings are there, and letting that play out is fun, I think, for Sims. I think that's part of the appeal of Sims, is that sort of like see these situations matched up. And that might sort of, as a segue, be towards the concept I sent to you guys randomly in the morning as it's reading this, is that in Catastrophe chapter 42, we get like Lanark's back. He woke up at the hospital. He gets back to the conference, and they're basically like, oh man, there's a crazy guy. That guy's like always drunk and fucked up. Like, look at him.
He's a pisser.
He's a pisser, pissed off the bridge. And goes through that. But what I thought was interesting is that he starts having like these quirks, like things start breaking down for him. He says like, he's like in 522, he's like, matter of fact, Gloop, said Lanark shyly. Sometimes I am an imaginary sadist. Yeah? Not a damaging sadist, an imaginary one. So from standpoint of occasional perverse frolic, it would help matters if lady in question, along with the other points enumerated, which are the essential points, make no mistake about it, these other points I enumerated are the essential ones. Where was perverse frolic? Good, and I'd like her not to be an imaginary masochist because I want to give her imaginary pain, not imaginary pleasure. Like, it's this bizarre breakdown. It happens again when they're like, are you telling me your name is Lanark? If you like. I mean, yes. Age? Indeterminate. I mean, indeterminate. Past halfway. Like, there's fucked up shit. And I was thinking about this in relation to
catastrophe. Postmodern literature is a catastrophe.
Is a catastrophe. Well, so I've been listening to that just finished this week with this show by Evan Ratliff called Shell Game, this podcast that's about AI. I think I've come to realize that it's more of a Nathan Fielder podcasting experiment than anything else, where this guy used a voice agent, which you can make using, like, we could upload this episode and it would create voice agents for all of us that sound just like you and can say whatever. And you tie it to an AI and it's capable of like setting up appointments for you. Like, AI, call my doctor's office, and it'll be like, do and do your thing. So he plays around with this idea that like AI is like invading everything in the future, blah, blah, and basically like exposes it over and over again for like what it is like a flawed system. Like, everything that it does doesn't quite work. And even if it did work, it wouldn't work. Like, it's really funny because he sets it up to like call customer service. And then there's one where he has it call his friends. And like, with one exception, his friends are immediately like, what the fuck are you doing, man? Like, what is this? This is clearly not you. Like, this is like, you sound a little coked up, or like this is, and the AI gets stuck in these repetitions where it'll just be like, oh yeah, thanks. It was great catching up last week. How are you doing? And it's like, oh, well, good. When do you mean catch up last week? He's like, oh yeah, I'm sorry, I forgot. We should catch up soon. It would be really great to meet you. With you. It's like this bizarre thing. But that like functionality, and like at one point he turns up the like randomness and it goes completely haywire, but like the AIs can't do certain things. And at the end he has it talking to his family. He sets it up to talk to the AI of his dad. And he's like, he sets up his dad's AI and he's like, Dad, like, this is Evan. Like, what was my childhood like? And the dad's like, this is Dad. I don't know you. It's nice to meet you, Evan. It's just like, this is our shit. But that coupled with this Arno Kamenisch essay that was in context that I wrote about in the last Mining the Delk Yard.
That's the most real thing. This is Dad. I don't know you.
I don't know you. I think he's called Professor Dad too. The AI calls itself Professor Dad. It's like it's so funny. And also like it's like he's like the big problem isn't like if this gets really good. The big problem is like if it all stays like this. And everyone's like, guess what, guys? AI is the future, but it's like always not that. And that's very interesting. But and would be super crippling and reminds me of this book where things get stuck in this middle area where it's like progress, but never fully progress, like lots of like complications. But in this Arno Kamenisch essay, he was asked like at a panel, and this is like just the perfect like panel festival response, but someone was like, what expectations do you have of the reader or the writer? And he's like, I have no expectations. The text has its own expectations of what the text should be, essentially. And I'm like, that is fucking catnip at like a panel at any sort of literary conference as an answer. And I'm not entirely sure what he means, but he writes about it in like a kind of allegorical way as like a sense that like the book or the characters do what they need to do based on the sort of premises that are provided for them. And the book has to become the book that it's supposed to be, that you can't like have expectations of what you're writing and you can't have expectations of what the reader will understand, but it just becomes its whole. And that like coupled with this AI thing made me see like Gray as being like, I've set this whole world up. Here's this character that just is acting itself out as if your character is like an AI bot being like, well, what's next? This is hi, Barbara. It's like this like broken down ass shit. And like I there's something about that appeals to me as like you as a writer being like, my character is like essentially like a weird AI. Like this is an imaginary world that lives in. It's been given a script. It's acting out that script and reacting in ways that I didn't expect as the author. It's out of my control in some ways. And at points when it glitches, like it does in Catastrophe, it glitches in a way that's incredibly funny, and also just entertaining. But maybe I don't know. That was my crazy thought for the week. My big idea.
Yeah. Did either of you read the very end, the goodbye? I did not.
Yeah.
The Tailpiece, yeah.
Is there anything that elucidates?
No.
Okay.
I do. No. This is important though. It says, so you spent so the time spent on Lanark over so many years was time well spent? Not entirely. Spending half a lifetime turning your soul into printer's ink is a queer way to live.
Yes, it's super solid.
I'm pretty sure I wasted my life.
You know, question:
pouring my heart and soul into paper and ink. This is dumb.
Related to that, when and why did you want to make a story of your life? Answer: surely everyone wants to be a hero or heroine. Sure thing.
Is this just about mindfulness? Like, life doesn't last forever.
I do like that he wrote this as 2 books, or was asked to split it into 2 books.
Well, it makes sense why the pastoral part feels so different, knowing that it was kind of its own thing that was absorbed.
Or that he led to absorbing it, right? But I like the fact that he was writing the end of book 2 and the end of book 4 simultaneously. Like that, and that would make sense for why some of those things trip through. My other favorite, this is not my line of the week. My line of the week is from the Tailpiece, but this isn't it. But I do love this. Well, first he talked to Quartet, which Quartet was an amazing press, and I'm pretty sure not many people listening to this will recognize them because they've been gone for quite a while. But they had this very like standardized look to their books that had like a kind of square geometrical outline. I'll post a picture. And they did really amazing like translations and non-translations, really cool books. They had like a weird influx outflux of money situation. They went under. But it's cool that he sent it to them and they were like, no thanks. But my favorite line of this is that Lippincott was going to publish it in the US. They get sold by Harper and Row. And then this happens. Then American editors proofread the book, decided my punctuation was inconsistent. I told them I used punctuation marks to regulate the speed with which readers took in the text. Some passages were to be read faster than others, so had fewer commas. There was more delay while I restored my text to its original state. I was like, yes! That over-anxious proofreaders are the bane of my existence.
Yes.
Like, oh, all this needs to be different. Oh, this manual of style says blah blah blah. It's like, you have no feel for this text, do you? You have no
This guy
feel
sounds
for.
this guy sounds too much of the Queen's English, you think?
So you're right. So
I need
yeah,
that.
so Catastrophe meets Gloopy again, which is fun. Gloopy, you've changed. You've improved. Can't say the same for you. Gloopy, I'm lost. I'm lonely.
I love how at the beginning of the book, Gloopy is just like a gloopy sort of amorphous mass of person. And at the end, Gloopy is like a bedrock person. He's just
He's
very
this.
stable.
That was the other thing that came up in the Shell Game podcast, is that the people that talked to his AI that were his friends, we'd call them afterwards and like, that was just an incredibly lonely experience. Like, I've never felt so lonely talking to this robot version of you. Even if it was like trying to trick it into doing things, like it was just like just this emptiness. And that seems very like real in here, but real to life too. I don't know if there's anything else from Catastrophe that I need to go on about. He's back at the deal. They claim that that there is one important part. 531 is that now they don't need. They need to. So the Council on Creature Cluster is meant to use as a cheap supply of human energy, but they won't do that now until they've sucked out those lovely rich juices discovered by your friend Mrs. Schnitzelgram, which is I call her.
What were the juices?
I think that that's going to make the energy. That Unthink was going to be destroyed for it to use the humans to make food and to power things, and instead she's discovered some other chemical process. There is a thread in here that I was going to point out that like is like the vibranium New Green Deal version of society, in which like they're constantly like, well, we needed all this stuff to make to keep things alive and going. However, we're going to discover some new properties. And this comes up in the next chapter during the speech by Monbodo, which we can jump to, in which Monbodo gives this giant to the whole congregation, is telling them like the future. He explains capitalism essentially, and like how people are like have been used over and over again. I mean, premises his idea on the fact that over the beginning of over the 20th century to when this takes place, whatever the fuck it is, that there have been more people born than in all previous times combined. So like exponentially, like discoveries and various like advances in technology or whatever else will be accelerated because there are just so many more people. And that the goal of society and humankind is to like use humans to produce these things. That's the excess. It's not necessarily like the natural resources, but manpower is kind of the resource that needs to be deployed to like improve things and be used up. And he's like, but we will always take more than we give, because that's how this works, is sucking the life out of everything and removing all the excess money or power or happiness or whatever. And then he goes on to be this like, can get back into this in more detail. But this one is okay. So he's like, we need to give them access to sufficient energy to be able to create all this new stuff. We need a new supply of energy, for energy is food as well as fuel. At present, dead matter is turned into nourishment by farming and by the consumption of uneducated people by clever ones. This arrangement is a failure because it's inefficient. It also puts clever people into a dependent position. Luckily, our experts will soon be able to turn dead matter directly into food in our industrial laboratories if we give them access to sufficient energy. Where can this energy be found? Ladies and gentlemen, it is all around us. It streams from the sun, gleams from the stars, and sings harmoniously in every sphere. It's time to admit that sending ships into space is not just an adventure, but a necessity. It goes on and on about this. And there's like another part where like, where is it now? It's in here where he's like talking, and they're like, well, there's going to be we're going to find this new force that will like allow for all the power to come place. Oh, so when he's talking to when the Lanark and Monbodo are alone, and he's like, the primary solution to the worldwide energy famine, which is oil. And then he goes on to say, like, through the development by Cortex and of unthanked mineral resources, they'll put prosperity within the grasp of everyone. So like the world's sort of situation related to energy is the big topic of all of this. And that is like essentially the capitalist enterprise. How do you keep this thing functioning and growing and moving and exploiting things? And what do you need? And like the resources of oil are contrasted within like this like solar global whatever. And then also when it comes up as oil, then he's like, well, we've got this new property that we're gonna find. And I just keep thinking of like vibranium from like Black Panther, and like they're just gonna be like, there's gonna be this magical shit that will fix everything, and we'll be super wealthy then, and we won't need energy, and we'll be all good. But I think that that's a really interesting way of dividing the world. They're talking about this kind of division of the world, especially in terms of governments, as to like having to obtain and marshal energy in whatever form that takes. And in this form, they keep talking about as like man, which goes back to your statement, Brian, then I'll stop talking, of like the postmodern moment of like this fragmentation is to allow people to be more easily exploited and to be like used as like they fuel something else. They are so separate, so like alone, desperate for love, distant from love, that these little things will keep them, they'll be our fuel, they'll be our energy. They will do things because they have no other real choice. And there's the lack of humanity within this, and the treating of them as like cubes of energy is real dark, but also like feels very true in our world today. Like, I don't think anyone gives a shit about a human being from the government. I read about the Supreme Court rulings. They don't care about humans at all. They just want like rules to keep themselves in power. And that's what this whole section is.
I'm surprised. I'm not surprised. Like, it's great that you got all of that out of the Monbodo speech, and I can see that and understand that. But page 540, I just have in all caps, so boring. And then at the top of 541, where Odin is like, bugger this, he's talked for 10 minutes and has only just reached the topic. I'm like, yes. So like, I'm glad you got and you were able to bring all of that, because I did read it, but I clocked out. I clocked out real early on that speech.
It's called explanation. It's explaining everything.
It's so long and boring, though.
I loved it. I love that section.
If we go back to page 476,
76.
there's hour 22 and hour 25.
Wait, do you mean 476? Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that what's happening in this explanation part of the book?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Right, because his end is hour 25, right? The delegates depart.
Yep.
Lanark departs, basically, but that big chunk is basically then, now, and tomorrow, right? 6 millennia of achievement will be outlined.
3 hours, yeah.
And is that what those long things are? Am I to understand that correctly?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yep. And so he's explaining the 6 millennia. That's where he's through all the like,
Yep.
They invented the wheel, they invented fire, they invented this, they did this. There are only this many of them. Now there's billions of people. Like, what else can we create? Like, let's get our shit into space, get our energy, do all this. But how will we do that? And that's where like this idea of the city comes in. Interestingly enough, there's like 2 components to this. One, we'll just start with the main one, is that there's this great bit on 542, which ties this book back into the Attilas, specifically Alyosha Cole's Attila. It references Attila, but this idea of the city
541
is being important is like such a key part of Attila by Alyosha Cole, where there's like Attila, there's Quixote, there's Rome, there's like all these like different lands, Ottoman Empire, the Roman Empire, so on and so forth. They're all like trying to figure out what the modern city will be. Like, what will society look like? Is it going to look Western? Is it going to look Eastern? What is it going to be? Like, this is all like, multi-layers of like abstraction and obfuscation in the Cole book, but it's there. And then I hit like 542, and it's talking about like men increase, wealth increases, war increases. Nowadays, when strong governments agree there must not be another big war, we can still applaud the old battles and invasions which blended the skills and conquerors and conquered. There are no villains in history. Pessimists point to Attila and Tamerlane, but these active men liquidated unprofitable states which needed a destroyer to release their assets. Wherever wealth has been used for mere self-maintenance, it has always inspired vigorous people to grasp and fling it into the service of that onrushing history which the modern state commands. Then pale pink people like myself, great line, pale pink people. But that part of like Attila is part of the thing that's in this book, or in the Attila book by Cole, of like kind of incorporating, taking over, annexing, releasing, changing the way that these societies or cities have been structured in order to like essentially make them more efficient and make their assets available to be used by other places. And that part of like globalization and whatnot is also very raw. This is like a very prescient political and very political book in this point in time.
Oh, it's evergreen. Yeah,
Banter
for
is coming.
sure.
All this shit is happening. The Reagan era is about to happen. Everything like that, this pathway is like there now and then gets cranked up to like 20 in our real world. And all this stuff about like, we'll find another energy source. Can't we just deploy things? Let's figure stuff out. That all got stalled by Reaganomics and by like the whole general like conservative movement against like the idea of climate change or of like any sort of change to the 1950s utopia. But like it's so political here and so directly related to like that kind of capitalist like exploitation. Which makes this book, I mean, this book's fascinating to me, I think, because it's all of these things. It is like a childhood bucolic moment, a relationship between father and son. It's got the Kafka-esque bits to it. It's funny. It's got other interpretations. The politics are strong. Everything's in here. So it is sort of like postmodern in that way that nothing's left out. There's high art of the church mural. There's all the church references. There's low art of him pissing off of a bridge as being like his kind of, you know, hubristic downfall. Like, it's such a weird and complex and strange book. And I understand why the reviews didn't really try and tackle much of it, aside from like the one or two like more essayistic ones or whatever. But like, there's so many ways to like approach and like why you might want to like read this book or get into it. There's so many different options or threads that you could follow. It's just that it is long and they're not all evident at once. And it parses it out in such a slow trickle, like of the where you are in Unthank, then this long section of like him growing up, and then back to where it's like just out. Like, and book 4 is just like all over then. Like it's all over the place and everything is possible. Anyway.
What's also possible is we could end this episode. I'm ready for the next book.
You're ready for the next book. Let's see if there's anything else you guys want to talk about. I do
This
like
episode
that
will end at 9:57.
I do like that that the when they're talking about Monbodo's speech, it's kind of like what you said, Kai, where you found it boring. It's like Monbodo's speech had hypnotized Lanark. He listened open mouth, nodding at the pauses. Whenever he understood a sentence, it seemed to say everything was inevitable and therefore right. That reminded me immediately of that scene in Schizopolis where the guy's coming to give his like Scientology speech, and the boss is like, "You got to give me a speech in which every sentence seems incredibly meaningful and is forgotten immediately after it's spoken." That everything like gives you the feeling of like complete knowledge, but with no specifics. Like this sort of like impossible but perfect, like, you know, diplomat speech where it's like, oh, this all sounds wonderful. I have no idea what that person really meant or said. I'm all lost here.
It's like Veep, right? I just had an ad. I had an ad that was trying to get me to give money to a political party. And it's like, today, not tomorrow, not next week. It's like, yeah, I know how time works. Like, today's right now. Why are we having these extra words? What is going on here? You're making it sound really like today's really important, like right now.
Oh man. The only thing related to my government thing is the 544 quote, which is really like the clutch one of two styles of government command the modern world. One works to reconcile the different companies which employ their people. The other employs the people themselves. Defenders of the first style think great wealth the reward and necessary tool of those who serve mankind best. To the rest, it is a method by which strong people bully weak ones. That one's also like a key, like this sort of breakdown. But yeah, so then there's an explanation. He gets to have at the end, Lanark gets to talk to Monbodo one-on-one. There's this great line of like, you know, it's very amazing. At last, the common man confronts the powerful lord of this world, except that you're not very common and I'm not very powerful. We can change nothing, you and I, but talk to me. It's like, yeah, this system is already too big. We got nothing. There's nothing we can do, but we can talk about it. We can talk about the problems and different ideas, but can we change anything? No. Everything's way, way beyond our abilities at this point. So, and then he dies essentially. Very, very pretty ending of the comments on his maps. The land lays over me now. I cannot move. It is time to go. Goodbye. Or hello, like Kaija says, she could be being reborn. Bardo.
I really like those last lines. I thought they were really nice too.
He'll turn into food.
Turn into
I've
food.
grown up. My maps are out of date.
It's true. I mean, once
God,
you
it's really good.
decompose. So, anything else you guys want to add to those sections or final like takes on the book?
I mean, Monbodo's speech, I do have in the margins like 545, where the fuel supply of the present planet is almost exhausted. Our destruction of other species begun in the last ice age now threatens the whole ecosphere, blah, blah, blah. I just wrote, Jesus Christ. Like we've all said, like, this is, there are such evergreen parts in this. And I always struggle when I find or read or hear things like this of like, wow, he first wrote this book in 69.
81.
Right? What?
81.
Well, why
It
does
came
it
out
say,
in 81.
why does it say copyright 69?
Oh, well, I think that he wrote, I don't know. That's interesting. There's parts of it that appeared in 69, but the full book comes out in 81.
Okay, so 69/81. And just I always struggle with being like, wow, this person like managed to write sentences in a way that you could apply it to any decade, any era. And then the other part being like, no, that's fucking terrifying because human nature just repeats itself. And this could be 69, 81, 91, 2001, 2021. And it's just the same shit over and over again. Like, how is our planet dying if we know this all the time? It's kind of soul crushing.
It says chapters 7 to 11 were written in 1969 and 1970, by which time Lanark's story was becoming greater than Thaw's, and I had decided to put the last inside the first. Large change came about in 61 when I married, and in 63 became a father. Then it doesn't explain the rest, but yeah, the 75 and 76, he was carrying the manuscripts around and working on them in all kinds of places. And that's where he's working on books 2 and 4 were written side by side and moved from completing a chapter in one to a chapter in the other with an increasing sense of running downhill. And that's very like Rodrigo Frazan vibe too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it doesn't get published till 81, but it seems like parts of it may have been published somewhere and thus copyrighted in 69. But
did you hear any of the rest of what I said, or were you focused on?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to find the date parts of it for
Got
you.
it.
That is evergreen, and these things are the same and unchanging in terms of our environmental collapse, especially.
My quote of the week, I think, helps. I think with what Kai is saying as well on 555. Like, why did the warnings are here, the history's there. Why is this happening? And it's again, I think it's on page 555 is a great way that kind of nods to that. I know this graveyard well, Sandy. So did your mother. I could tell you a lot about it. This bridge we're coming to, for instance, had a tributary of the river flowing under it once. Shut up and keep moving, Dad.
Just above that, where he's like, I like this. And Jesus Christ, muttered Alexander.
Do I sound senile?
It's like, I've lived in this land. I know this land. I can tell you about it. It's been shaped and it's different now. It's like, just shut up.
Shut up. And I love that. I love the italics. Just shut up and
put me under the ground. Bye.
same right below that.
This is yours now. Good luck. Don't make the same mistakes I made, but whatever. Bye.
That's down below too. Like, yes, said Lanark excitedly. We must get to the top. There's going to be a flood, a huge, immense deluge. Don't be stupid, Dad. No, I'm not stupid. Somebody told me it would end in a deluge. He was very definite about it. That somebody told me.
I saw it on Nextdoor.
I heard about it. The people are saying. Kaija, do you have a favorite line of the week?
Yeah. It's going back to when Lanark is in the piss/drunk tank. And he meets his neighbor. Oh shit, I just lost it. Yeah. What did they at the bottom of 527 and top of 528? So he meets his neighbor and they start talking. And he says, what did they get you for? Lanark says, I pissed off a bridge. The guy says, the police, said the voice bitterly, are a shower of bastards. Are you sure you don't have a cigarette? No, I don't smoke. And that's Lanark. What did they get you for? And the neighbor says, I hammered a man up a clothes and called the police a shower of bastards. I just like that, a shower of bastards.
Mine is based off of is right after the one that you quoted earlier, Brian, about spending half a lifetime turning your soul into printer's ink is a queer way to live.
Yeah.
It's down below where he says, I'm sure healthy panthers and ducks enjoy better lives, but I would have done more harm if I'd been a banker, broker, advertising agent, arms manufacturer, or drug dealer. There are worse as well as better folk in the world, so I don't hate myself.
Last words.
Book closed. We're out. So we shouldn't give away all the details yet, but should we announce what we're going to plan on doing?
Yes.
Okay, so we will be back with a longer season, another traditional season, the 2-month review. But I think that in the interim, what we're going to do is each one of us is going to be picking a book on our own out of like a few different categories. And we'll be doing at least 3 one-off episodes. And we'll probably get this in the rotation, but we're going to try it as an experiment first. We'll do 3 one-off episodes in which each one of the 3 hosts will sort of lead it. We'll create like the script. We'll walk us through the book. The other 2 may or may not have read the book, may have read around it, may have read parts of it, may not want anything to do with it. It could be a book that's really terrible, a book that's really interesting, a book from the backlist that's worth rediscovering, a book that was very popular and deserves a second look, or a book that like is truly terrible and we can have fun with. So we're going to announce that soon. And we actually do have, I believe, a few ideas in the hopper about which books will be there. We'll let you know in advance so that if you want to read them ahead of time or read about them, you can. Otherwise, they will be fun episodes that are sort of a break or like an intermediary between like these 8 or 9 episode seasons, and something that you don't have to like follow along with the whole book to get the most out of, but can just be like a one-off episode talking about a particular book that will be hopefully very fun, especially if we dive into sort of the paratextual elements around some of these things, like for the rediscoveries or for like books that are pretty bad that end up being big sellers. Like, how did that happen? Or books that were really just like popular at one point in time or have like a lot of criticism written about them or praise of them, like how that compares to reading the book now, say a few years later. So we'll announce all of that definitely along the way. I can't not read this comment from Big Boar that just says, I don't read books and I'm excited. And that is what we're here for. I think that's the note we leave on.
Mission accomplished.
We don't even need to do those episodes now.
No, we're good. We're good. So in the meantime, rate and review us. Follow the 3% website, which just type in 3% Rochester. You'll get there. You can subscribe to the Mining the Delkey Archive Substack, which won't include information from this, but is interesting. Follow all of us on Twitter. Buy Brian's book. Buy Kaija's triptych of 3 Latvian authors that's coming out in March of next year. She translated one called River by Lara Vingradova.
Nailed it.
Jana Egla's Birthday is another, and then Berlin by Andres Kupras are the 3 books. 2 of the 3 are currently on sale at the Open Letter website because it is Women in Translation Month. So any book that is written by or translated by a woman or female identifying author or translator is available at 40% off. So you can go there, pre-order both of those, order a bunch of other Open Letter books. It's at openletterbooks.org. One last thing is if you listen to the podcast, The Life on Books, which is quite popular and run by Tony and Andrew, their book of the month for September for their book club is Death in Spring by Merce Rodoreda. Buy that right now too, and it's 40% off. And we just got in a huge batch new shipment because that book keeps selling out, but it's there now. So jump on it, buy it, read it. We've done that book as a 2-month review podcast as part of a Rodoreda season. I'll link to that in the show notes as well. But I think that's all the ending rigmarole. Anything from anyone else?
Just shut up and keep moving.
Yep, I'm learning how to break dance from this Australian lady. I'll post some pictures later once I learn the routine.
Please do.
Too soon, yet their mouths still remain and stack up towards the moon. How that ladder of mouth waves so soft in the night, and I looked up in awe at that beautiful